Hey, welcome to It's Time for Affordable Housing. I'm your favorite host, LaShondra Grace, the apartment lady, founder of the Apartment Housing Rentals Foundation. I am so excited to introduce my guest. He is, how are you today?
I'm pretty good, Ashonda. I'm pretty good. Getting over an eye infection, but doing good.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing good. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
I started NACA 38 years ago. So my background is, I'm a product of the 1970s. Fighting for economic justice. So I wanted to, do that, on the shoulders and on the foundation laid out by the civil rights activists and people who fought and died to give us the opportunities that we have today. So, I have an undergraduate degree in economics out of UConn, University of Connecticut. Went to work in Washington for a moderate Republican back then as an LBJ scholar with Stuart McKinney, Congressman McKinney. Went to work in the Carter administration in the Department of Energy. And then I went to do I did an MBA at NYU to learn the enemy. So you go to NYU supposedly to work on Wall Street and make money. I went there to learn the enemy, so I did that as well as doing a MA in politics. And then I got a job at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York in the domestic applications area. To learn the enemy. We had an agenda, and that was the place to be at the Fed because everything in the domestic applications went through that office. They educated me to the CAMEL analysis, capital, asset management, equity, liquidity, and I'd access to their confidential information about banks. And this is the second district. So this is the biggest bank, not just in the country, but in the world. So I was there and I had access to all this stuff. And so because anytime a bank wanted to merge, acquire, expand, they had to come through us. But we were we were very supportive at the Fed. The Fed was very supportive of what the banks wanted to do. But I saw in all that stuff that the banks were always doing something illegal. Yeah, because that's what bankers do. They always want to, get as much money as they can, whether it's legal or illegal. That's what they do. So you figure out now, sometimes, what they did illegally was, insider trading and all that. It wasn't necessarily, I'm not going to lend to someone of color. I'm not going to lend to a minority home buyer or in a minority community, even though that's the reality, but they're not so blatant about that. They use credit scores and other excuses for not doing that. But that's what they did. And, I was a young person and, there were some applications that I had refused to approve because, they were not lending as they were required to do. And a history of not lending in violation of CRA and all that. And so, I was not a team player. So I decided, okay, let me go out to these nonprofits, these advocacy groups and say, hey, I have access to all this confidential information. I'll give it to you to do that. And these different groups out there said, well, can you show that the banks are engaged in racist discriminatory lending? I said, well, not so easy, but I can tell you where their vulnerability is. I can tell you what they're doing illegal, what crimes that they are committed. Because you've got to find, when you do a campaign, you've got to find their weakest link, even though that weakest link might not be directly associated with what your passion and what your mission is, but you got to find it. So I knew how to find it, and I knew where the vulnerabilities were. But these groups were not interested in it. They just wanted the smoking gun on their particular issue. So that was a bit frustrating. So I went from there, to make a long story short, to Boston, started working for a nonprofit CDC, started volunteering with the Hotel Workers Local 26 in Boston and with Mel King, who just passed, but wonderful person, you know, always, Mel, he had to play tennis at 7 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't be at 8 o'clock, couldn't be at night, had to be at 7 o'clock in the morning. So Mel and I would play at 7 o'clock in the morning. But as a civil rights icon and activist, he was that and more. So anyway, with the hotel workers, we ended up organizing for a housing trust fund. It was illegal to do that because it was not a permissive subject of bargaining. So it's not written in the Taft-Hartley law, but we violated the law. We got the hotel owners to do a housing trust fund. And then we got over 18-month campaign, we got President Bush to sign it. And then it didn't work because even though hotel workers, and back then in the 1980s, it wasn't that long ago, if you worked in a hotel, and if you were a guest in a hotel, you would think that the hotel was 80% or almost all white. But actually, it was the opposite. It was, 80% people of color and overwhelmingly women. But, if you were working in the back of the house, stewarding, housekeeping, you couldn't even eat in the cafeteria. You had to eat on the store, in the stairways. I mean, worse than being treated as a second-class citizen. But the union was taken over by Dominic Pizzato. We headed it. We changed the union. We negotiated first ever housing trust fund, got that signed into law, and then but it didn't work. So we actually coined the term predatory lending back in the 1980s, where these contractors and second lien lenders were targeting minority homeowners and stealing their equity. So we started there, and 38 years later, we continue the fight.
I was as I was reading, the history, and I saw all of the events you were doing over years, the hotel event, starting with the President Bush, then coining, predatory lending, and getting that signed into, a law. And then I looked at 1998, and that's when I bought my first house. At 21, I was living in the projects, public housing. But I always wanted to my daughter wanted a house, and I figured out how to raise my credit, get a house, but it was in 1998. I'm 21. It was the deal. I bought this house. The house was not worth anything, like anything, And no one around me knew anything about credit, lending, credit cards. As growing up in the projects and an impoverished neighborhood, everybody paid for things with cash. Right. And so the only advice I got when I bought this house was, don't get any credit cards. So now there's this 25,000 credit card offer. I didn't get it, but then I needed a service drop. So I ended up in a loan that was predatory. Now the mortgage was predatory, the loan was predatory, and they didn't really do the work. And I'm thinking, had I known about NACA at that time, I didn't have any resources around me to tell me how to keep this house, how to get out of this impossible mortgage. And I ended up losing this house. So, and now coming to where you are now and how you guys have been able to stay 1% under the federal mortgage loan percentage. You're like 1% under, and then this character-based lending. And I'm like, okay, I'm the apartment lady. I deal with renters. It's harder to rent than it is to get a mortgage, even a FHA mortgage. I've been trying to get the renters into FHA mortgages because evictions don't matter, just 580 credit score and 2 years of documented, stable income, and 1 year of no late payments on your credit. I'm like, okay, that's doable. Most renters have those credentials. I mean, how could, NACA prevent someone from going through what I went through? Where is predatory lending now when it comes to NACA's model? And what's your new model? There's 3, 4, 5 questions in this.
Sure. So let me take a step back and say, what do we do? So that's where I started with, which I was explaining. And so we took on predatory lending, and the biggest player out there was Fleet. Fleet, and their entity was Fleet Finance. And Fleet was based in Providence. And Providence back then was known as the mob capital. So, and you couldn't do business in Providence or in Rhode Island if you didn't deal with them. So they're a pretty tough player to go against, but they were the biggest player. So we took on Fleet, and it was a 4.5-year war. And over 40% of Fleet's revenue was from Fleet Finance, which is based in Georgia. So anyway, we did all kinds of demonstrations. I mean, we ended up disrupting their annual meeting. Their CEO, Terry Murray, we went after him. We demonstrated at his homes, at his social events, at his club. When they bought Bank of New England, they had KKR as one of their partners. We took that piece on. We ended up, when they had hearings, we got hearings. We brought over 600 Fleet borrowers to Washington to the Senate Banking Committee. We took over that hearing. Their only supporter was Senator Kerry back then. He was the senator back then. Everybody else was against Fleet. That afternoon, we met with the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in their ornate conference room. And there's a lot of stories that go along with this, but one of them quickly is that that was the same day that President Clinton was having his first State of the Union. Mm. So we were meeting with the Board of Governors, the actual Board of Governors. And so they had the first $1 bill on the wall, and there was a $5 bill, and we have about 125 people jammed into the conference room. The deal was that Fleet executives could be there, but they couldn't speak, so people were in their faces. And then the board said, some of the board members said, well, we have to go home to get dressed up because we're going to the State of the Union up on Capitol Hill. And we said, well, we ain't leaving until we know what you're going to do, and we, had the next step. Well, the response is, what do you mean you're not leaving? We're not leaving. You're going to have to arrest all of them. And so we had a standoff for over an hour. Finally, they caved and they said the next steps. And so, so we let them out to go to their State of the Union address. We came back 6 weeks later. They didn't keep to their word. We ended up blockading the entrance to the Federal Reserve, and it's still there. There's a road between the two buildings. We blockaded it. It's raining, pouring out with rain, and these two limousines pull up right, in the middle between the two buildings, and someone yells out, "That's Alan Greenspan," and he's got his security people, and all these people are, really surrounding him. So we have about 75 people. We rush around, we surround them, and so, what are you going to do about Fleet? I get a tap on the shoulder, and it says, "That's not Alan Greenspan, that's the Italian finance minister." And at that point, the Red Brigade was pretty serious back then. They're killing these guys. So they were really panicked. He said, "We don't care, whether it's the Italian finance minister or it's Alan Greenspan, we're taking them on, not non-violent, but we surrounded the guy, can't go anywhere." So they caved, and they did what we needed to do. The last thing we had to do to beat Fleet was and this was a 4.5-year war, literally a war. And the last thing that happened was, the death threats out there. It's pretty intense. Was that Terry Murray, their CEO, was speaking at an event sponsored by the Harvard Business School. So we ended up stealing the names of the Harvard Business School alumni for that breakfast. So we So we got in. About, there were about 40 of us. They hadn't seen so many people of color as Harvard Business School graduates. So we took over that meeting. It was at the Marriott in Newton, Massachusetts, and we shut it down. We said to Terry Murray, "You're not speaking," and he said, "I'm going to settle this." And he was good to his word. And so 2 weeks later, we had an agreement. And what it was is that they did an $8 billion in-city program. They settled all the lawsuits, including with Roy Barnes to become governor of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us, and we got a $140 million mortgage program. And what that $140 million was, it was no down payment and no closing costs, no fees. And the last thing Terry Murray says to me as I'm leaving, he says, "I've given you everything you wanted, everything that you have demanded. You're never going to be an activist again. I've given you enough rope to hang yourself." And so he didn't say it in a nasty way. He just said, "You're going to be so regulated, so stuck into all this that you're never going to be an activist again." But what he didn't realize is he gave us full control. So we took that $140 million mortgage commitment, and we now have $20 billion of the best mortgage in the country. $20 billion. That means when we say we're the only organization that can say it's the best mortgage in America, because we're regulated as a nonprofit mortgage broker in all 50 states. And when you put it on your material that says the best mortgage in America, these regulators, they take that seriously. They look at that and they say, "Prove it," and we prove it. And then we push them on that. And then they come back and they say, "Yes, you're the only organization that can say it's the best mortgage. You're the best mortgage in America." So what does that mortgage do? Does one, it overcomes the 4 major roadblocks to affordable homeownership. People work hard, but it's tough to save. So what it does is no down payment and no closing. People have low credit score, or they deal with circumstances that are out of their control. So we never look at someone's credit score. We look at the payment that they control, focusing on the last 12 months, and say, "Are you ready for home ownership?" And then we use what we call character-based lending to say, are there compensating factors? Maybe you're late in that because life happens. We've all gone through difficult things, but have your circumstances changed? So what are the compensating factors? What are the character-based lending takes into account? Because we never look at someone's credit score. Number 3, unaffordable terms, always at a fixed rate. So today's rate for a 30-year fix is 5.5%. For a 20-year, it's 5.25%. No, for 15-year, it's 5.25%. For a 20-year, it's 5%. And there's no points, there's no fees, there is nothing like that. And so then the last thing is deal with racism and biases. And we're an advocacy organization. So when someone is NACA qualified, they are essentially approved. So virtually 100% of our loans that we submit to the lenders, we get $15 billion out of Bank of America. They're our biggest partner. Virtually 100% are approved. So you said it sounds too good to be true, but we're really not. We're building on what was done for white people during, after World War II. So when you think of the FHA or the VA mortgage, remember the VA mortgage is a no down payment mortgage. But what built the white suburbs after World War II? And it was the white suburbs because someone of color could not access those mortgages or buy those properties. It was the VA no down payment mortgage. So let's take that same concept and say, let's focus that on the people and the communities that have been shut out and have been discriminated against in lending. And that's what we do. So we've done over 75,000 mortgages, over 75,000. And we have a foreclosure rate of 0.00012, about 1/100 of 1%. So what we're doing is, so we've established, we have reinvented mortgage lending. we are a nonprofit, so we are the largest HUD certified counseling agency in the country. There's 1,700 counseling agencies. We're one. We do over 30% of the counseling in the country, and we do it better than anybody else out there, with all due respect, to the other groups. And so we've got that. To answer your question, LaShonda, on tenants, things have really, it's not easy to become a tenant, to get an apartment, as you know, because you work through that process. So what we're saying to tenants out there, if you're paying high rent, you should be able to pay less than you're paying in rent for a mortgage payment, because there's no down payment, there's no closing. We don't consider one's credit score. The criteria that you as a tenant go through with a lot of these landlords is intense. And, that basically qualifies you to be a homeowner, and you should have that opportunity to be a homeowner. And we can talk more about what we're doing in the campaign, in support of tenants.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. So then I'm still, on my tenants. How can they, become a homeowner through NACA? Now I'm dealing with, tenants make up 37% of America. Tenants make up 37% of America. And I'm telling the tenants, like, look, you guys, my members, the only real currency in America is land. There's not that many, there's more buildings in these impoverished neighborhoods than houses available. So how can my tenants get into this program and be successful when there's probably no housing there? Can they buy a building?
So what we're doing, so you're exactly right. The one thing is, what we do out there, I can only say that we were really successful in June of 2019. So what happened in June of 2019? We did a huge event in New York City. It was at the World Casino in Queens. We had over 20,000 people there, home buyers, over 5 days. And we did no media, no outreach. And everybody heard about it from word of mouth, family, friends, neighbors, co-workers, and it was 99% people called. So the drumbeat in the communities is for affordable home ownership comes to NACA. And then we did events in Chicago, St. Louis, Los Angeles. It's the same thing, word of mouth. So yes, people should go to our website at NACA.com to take the first step. But one of the things that we are doing now is that, well, we're always looking to do it better, and we're always looking to do more. So there's a lack of inventory in a lot of places. And even in where there is the inventory, it needs, the houses need to be repaired. So one thing that we have done for a long time is we have the, purchase rehab program where people can purchase a home and have funds set aside after they close to do the renovation. But now we're doing new construction. So we have a program that's called the $1 program. So the $1 program is in your city or town. There's a lot of property that the city or town owns because they did it through tax foreclosures and other issues, which they took the property back from the previous owner. And we're saying, okay, we want them to sell that land to a home buyer for $1, and we'll provide the financing for the new construction. And we're now, this year we'll be building, hundreds, if not thousands of units that are factory built, prefab units, beautiful units, energy efficient, meaning that you reduce energy costs by over 75%. And the cost of that, LaShondra, is $85 a square foot, generally speaking. What's that cost? That means for a 1,200 beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, you're talking about around $100,000. And then once you put the foundation maybe it becomes 110, somewhere around that. And then you have a mortgage payment of around $700 a month without any subsidy yet, without a penny of subsidy. Then if you have the subsidy, you're talking about getting it even less than that. And that's the thing. So why does that work? Because what's the game changer there? The game changer is a few things. One thing, if it goes straight from the city, the town, to the home buyer, you're eliminating the developer fees of between 25 and 50% of the cost. And because you're building it in a factory setting and you are delivering the house whole, to the property, you've got highest level quality. These are hurricane, tornado resistant, panelized, structural panel, beautiful home. And, but you're saving a lot of money there, over 30% of the cost and much higher quality. And this is what we're doing. So what I'm doing tomorrow is I'm going to Lima, Ohio. Why Lima? But this is taking off in Newark, New Jersey, it's taking off in Lima, taking off in, Hobson City, Alabama, and other places around the country, in Texas and around the country, because the mayor of Lima has been a NACA advocate for years when she was the chief of staff. And when she became mayor, she called me and she said, I want NACA in Lima, Ohio.
Wow.
So she's got hundreds of property. I think she said she's got 700 properties, and she wants to build on those, and some of them where they're actually buildings that can be renovated once NACA, home buyers are purchased, and to renovate that. That's what we're doing. And so you're always expanding, but you got to deal with the inventory, and that makes it affordable because you cannot find out there. I mean, you cannot find out there working anywhere in the country to get a house for less than $200,000. And most times we're talking $250,000 and $300,000. I mean, even the nonprofit entities that are doing it are not making it as affordable as it needs to be. So that's what we're going to do. And just think about it. This is going to be about a third of the cost that you can go out and to purchase a property. And so we're very excited about that. It's really disrupting the development business like we have disrupted the mortgage business.
I am excited to hear that. But, I have some reservations, right? Because
Sure.
I have all these people getting evicted. I mean, upwards of 5,000 families a week across the United States is getting evicted because of, this eviction moratorium, and then all of everything was snatched from under them, and, things like that. And so then I'm thinking about these prefab units. They're doing